And so I guess going back to that day, I never anticipated the media attention. I thought that maybe 200 people would come to the march, and I was very surprised when over 1,000 people showed up, not just in Skaneateles, but from neighboring towns, and people came from Syracuse as well. And I think it was interesting to see, especially in the middle of a pandemic, how people showed up that was most comfortable for them.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jose, and this is our Zeta Tech Pathways podcast. Welcome to today's episode. I'm incredibly excited to be joined by Cecilia, whose journey seamlessly weaves together grassroots activism, technology policy, and leadership. From organizing a Black Lives Matter march in her small town that brought over 1,000 people together to tackling the complexities of data privacy and tech regulation, she's someone who understands how activism and innovation intersect. Today, we'll explore how her upbringing in both the small town community of Skaneateles, New York, and the urban energy of Boston shaped her perspective, her work leading in moments that mattered most, and her deep dive into technology, social impact, and policymaking. We'll also talk about what it's like to connect with industry icons, work at institutions like the Council on Foreign Relations and the White House, and fight for meaningful change in the tech world. Let's get into it. Hey, Cecilia, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, super excited. I know we were talking about it earlier, but particularly excited to have you as a guest because looking into your bio ahead of the conversation really took me down memory lane, having grown up in a small town as well. You all have, I think we were just talking about it, like you have 3,000 people inside the town of Skaneateles, and then a couple more thousand folks like around. And I grew up in Fort Bragg, California, which is in Northern California on the coast, a very small like tourism community, which I think you all are as well from the pictures and videos I saw online. And so our population hovers right around there, just under 10,000, surrounded by the Pacific Ocean and forest, as opposed to like a lake and forest, which is the vibe I get from Skaneateles. Is that a fair vibe?
That is definitely a fair vibe. And I think, also growing up in a small town, you understand the power of knowing your neighbor and what that means to have collective care and empathy for your community. And growing up in a single parent household, I really grew up to understand what it means, what the quote, "it takes a village to raise a child" means. And so my neighbor has always played a pivotal role in my life in creating just such a supportive environment that that support alone shaped my values. And also, my first job as a teenager was delivering mail on our 17-mile glacial lake on one of the three functioning mail boats in the United States. And so, through that experience alone and talking to locals, to tourists, again, tourist community, really learning from that perspective on what it means to be community-driven environmental stewards, to really take care of the lake from climate change and harmful algae blooms, to supporting small businesses and really looking out for one another. Compared to Boston, I think uh, the Boston is an academic hub. There are so many museums and science and art, and I'll get into more on how I interacted with the arts in Boston through family. And when I went to Boston to visit my family, it was just the aquarium, Boston Aquarium, highly recommend visiting, the MoMA, and really feeling like my knowledge was enriched from a global perspective and what I could see and find in Boston, which built on the localized knowledge that I gained in Skaneateles.
Yeah, I think that's so true, right? I mean, you touch on small towns being like such a like um, powerful force in like development. And I know we're kind of diving deep into it already, which is great. Um, because my first question for you was, how did growing up both between Skaneateles and Boston kind of shape you? And as someone that grew up in a small town also, I think it's such a like superpower. I always tell folks growing up in a community where everybody knows each other, and there's so much diversity, there's so much interconnectedness, is wonderful because you have a really great support network because there's so much intimacy. But it also, I think, teaches you how to work together. You kind of have to. You're forced to, because you know there's one grocery store, there's one like community center, there's a small number of folks, and so you learn how to get along. And I think that that's something that, working in DC, at least myself, like I feel like I carry with me, in really always trying to hold that principle of like, how do you continue to engage with community and get along? And nowadays that's kind of hard. And so, so I really love that. You talk about the influence of the arts, and that's something that you note is a pretty big influence in your life and the way that you go about a lot of your work. And your dad's a professional cellist. You played the cello, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So that's a really interesting environment to grow up in, right? Surrounded by music. How did living in a home filled with music and that creativity influence your leadership, as a young person?
I love this question because it's very nuanced. I think that music has opened the doors for how I see the world, and that's because it's always been a consistent source of meditation and creativity in my life. And you're correct. So I actually played the cello for 8 years before I transitioned to competitive sprinting. And uh, learning from my dad, who is currently the only Black musician in the Boston Symphony, I that really illuminated what it means to have such a lack of representation, and what it took for him to remain disciplined and to work towards and celebrating the small wins to reach the level he's at in his career right now. And I think with that context, also, my grandfather was the first person in our family to leave Louisiana because he wanted to pursue medicine. And my grandmother's family was the first to move from Tennessee. And both of those sides have their own unique forms of resilience. Uh, and so for him to practice that creativity and reach that level in his career um, really just shows that his presence in this space is not just a personal expression or a career achievement, but also challenges statistics and actively shapes my understanding of what underrepresented spaces mean and informs my work or it makes sure that creativity informs my work, whether it's activism or within policy. And the statistic that I'm referring to is that less than 2% of musicians in American orchestras are Black. And that's from the American League of American Orchestras, I believe. So it's been very informative and everything builds on one another.
One of the things that I find is interesting is that you are both a musician and you also, um, are a sprinter. And I did cross country in high school. I was not very good, or fast, I should say. I can run pretty long distances, but can you tell me a little bit about how that like mental conditioning has helped you as well? Because if there's one thing I know about running, it's that it's as much a mental sport as it is a physical sport.
Mhm. Absolutely. Hmm. So I started running when I was 8, and I gave up the cello my sophomore year of high school so I could really focus on um, definitely training and becoming good in hopes of getting recruited. And so I did get recruited to Brown, which was D1, and I ran there for a few years. And I'd say what track has taught me is how much you have to, as an individual sprinter, it's just you against you. And you have to build that type of mental resilience in order to um, stay at, um, you have to have that mental resilience to cheer on your teammates, but also take that confidence you have with your teammates and instill it in yourself and what you can do. And your teammates' goals are just as important as your own, and to be kind to yourself in the sport as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such a big takeaway. Like the be kind to yourself piece. Um, I for anybody out there that's like looking to get into running, I highly recommend it because I do think there's this component, like regardless of whether you're very fast, not so fast like me, there's an element of kind of learning how to be kind to yourself because when you're running, like it is kind of you against you, and you kind of set the tone for how you are in the right state of mind and finish a race or finish a meet, and you're just like you're happy about it, and it's like, okay, maybe I broke a personal record, maybe I didn't, but like I came out here, I ran, I accomplished this. I'm going to be happy for my team members, or I'm just going to be happy that I showed up. And so I love running still, and I love that about you, that you're like one, like so incredibly like versed in the arts, in music, that you're like such a champion in sports as well. I want to get us into a conversation about activism. I think this is a good segue actually, because it seems like a lot of your upbringing and a lot of kind of your background early on was nudging you in the direction of activism. And so I want to talk about your leadership when it mattered most. One of the highlights that I thought was really interesting about you is in 2022 you founded the Skaneateles for Social Justice organization and organized a Black Lives Matter march that drew a lot of attention to your small town. What sparked that movement for you?
Yeah, and just a quick clarification, I founded it in 2020, but it went until 2022 when we were very active with it. But
Hmm.
I uh so the concept of activism and then also digital activism, I think is in 2020, at least for me, was something I was becoming more aware to and really thinking about. So I don't think that there are proper words to describe witnessing George Floyd's murder through our phones, and I still don't think that there are words to describe. I mean, there are, but I think we're still trying to articulate what it means to witness police brutality or a genocide through our screen. And so, that being said, in 2020, when I watched that brutal video that the world also watched, and starting to see the coordination of digital activism through educational avenues, resource building, community care, the marches and protests, I knew that I wanted to contribute to that. And so it was a very spontaneous thing that I did where I got together a few friends and we got it together in less than 2 weeks and hosted the march. And so it was very a quick turnaround, but the why we founded Skaneateles for Social Justice was to contribute to building on educational resources and to promote those community discussions that in Skaneateles we needed. And because of that, for a context, according to the 2023 census, Skaneateles was or is 96% white and 0.3% Black. That's probably me and a few friends. And so that statistic alone, there were a lot of discussions that needed to be had. I most certainly have experienced racism in this town, and I know a lot of other stories that are similar and not an anomaly here. So taking that context, that's why we wanted to have the march and have these educational platforms that would be appropriate and applicable to my community.
I have to say, I admire you so much for doing that. in part because and it's important to clarify here, like for folks that are not from a small town, you you put yourself out there, like you put yourself in a vulnerable place, you put yourself kind of in an exposed place when you quote unquote like rock the boat, right? Or you take a stance that's just not tempered, right? Like in these, like, and I don't know, I don't want to make an assumption about Skaneateles, but in these maybe more conservative small towns, or these small towns where folks kind of have an aversion to talking about politics. At the town that I grew up in is a very small, politically diverse town, and my family was kind of a part of a large immigration of Latino immigrants that came into the town in the 90s or so, as they were turning into like a tourism town and away from a lumber mill kind of town. And the tensions are felt. I mean, it's I remember, like, being kind of like specifically targeted, and like followed by like teachers or police officers, like just I mean, we know why. And it's to then speak up is really commendable. What can you tell us about that day of the march? I know you all got quite a bit of attention, but can you take us through that day for you?
Yeah, and I think on what you just said as well, it's hard because in small towns that, you do, like, I love, like I said earlier, I love my community and I love this town, and the people who have become such close friends are also my family. And that is, that also means if you love something, you want it to be better and to really reach its potential in terms of how can we meet this moment, and how can we really capitalize on the resources that we have in order to provide that education. And yes, Skaneateles is definitely leans more conservative. When I was in middle school and a little bit of high school, when I was at Skaneateles, the students would wear Confederate flags on their t-shirts, and so that wasn't really something that was shocking people, at least from my own perspective and experience. It was definitely ingrained into this normalization of that type of display here. And so I guess going back to that day, I never anticipated the media attention. I thought that maybe 200 people would come to the march, and I was very surprised when over 1,000 people showed up, not just in Skaneateles, but from neighboring towns, and people came from Syracuse as well. And I think it was interesting to see, especially in the middle of a pandemic, how people showed up that was most comfortable for them. And so that might be staying on lawns and holding up signs, walking on sidewalks, or even, commenting under videos we put up. It was just really commendable to see how much people were willing to not just show up, but to listen as well. And so the most surprising thing I would say from that day was after the march, once the speaker program concluded. So we had the march and we had a speaker program after with speakers of colors talking about their experience within the town, the neighboring towns, and also their vision for the future. An elderly Black woman pushed her way up to the front and not pushed her way up to the front. An elderly Black woman came up to the front and asked if she could come up to the podium and speak. And her name is Judy Bryant. And this was unexpected. We didn't even know she was in the crowd or listening. She was Harriet Tubman's great great grandniece. And she just spontaneously spoke at the podium about her great great aunt's legacy, how she's upholding that legacy, um and continuing it, and her vision for the future and her hope as well. And so none of us anticipated that, but that was most definitely the biggest takeaway. And I'm currently reading Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, Between the World and Me. And one of his quotes that that I read this week was something, I think it was like, never forget we were enslaved in this country longer than that we've been free. I don't know if I directly quoted that correctly, but I think that in terms of through the lens of education, it's important to understand and remain cognizant that Miss Bryant's great great aunt is Harriet Tubman, and that's not too far away. And um, Miss Bryant was or is or at that time, I believe, was in her mid 80s, and um, the amount of change that she's seen in her life is absolutely unbelievable. And emphasizing that education of what remains as systemic inequalities, what are effective pathways through learning from history, is just absolutely fundamental to addressing all these challenges that we continue to see today.
I look at leaders like you, especially young leaders of color, and I think about like the value of the love and admiration you have for your town. And that really stood out to me, like looking back at actually the videos of the march and the videos of the like the speaking that you all did at kind of the end of the march in Skaneateles. Um, you prefaced a lot of what you said by talking about how much you loved and appreciated the town, and you said it here again in this conversation that you do love your community, you love this town where you grew up. That doesn't mean that it can't be better. In fact, it's quite the contrary. It's because you love this town that you want it to continue to grow and evolve and be better and better accommodate everybody, right? And I think that's so valuable in starting conversations, inviting people in, especially in small communities where there's an immense pride in that identity, that like small town identity. I certainly have seen that, and um, I I saw that as kind of a first generation person in small town America. A lot of folks don't necessarily kind of look at maybe California of all places and think, small town America, conservative, but um, Confederate flags were very common, like all over our town. And it was weird because we had like a mix of um, like a lot of camo, and then we also had kind of that like California, like northern coast, like hippie vibe. So like I remember like walking down our little main street, and I'd like look in like these little store windows, and people would be selling like tie-dyed camo, and I'd be like, that pretty much sums up our town. Like I don't really know how else to describe it. And then we had a lot of Mexican food, a lot of good Mexican restaurants, and so that's, I don't know how else to describe it, but um, it is people standing up and saying, hey, like, I do love this community. I appreciate this community, but we need to have a moment to, like recognize that there's work to do. Um, I just think that's so important. All politics is local, right? And I mean, I do think that like we change hearts and minds in that way. Um, as a part of that work, you did have some encounters where maybe you kind of had to face some of those tensions. Can you tell us about that and what that experience taught you about leading activism when the power structures aren't exactly on your side all of the time?
Absolutely. So what you just said about politics are, I think the power in local politics is something that is often overlooked and left out of discussions on how to make change within local communities that then domino effects up to the federal level. And when we put up our advertising posters for the march, someone who was not in our group filmed our mayor ripping them down. And for context, they were on telephone poles, which technically is against town ordinance to have paper on telephone poles, which I it was our bad. However, I am inclined to believe that if it was a poster for a yard sale, It would not be ripped down violently. And the mayor was filmed. The person who was filming him was asking, "Why are you doing this?" And to which he responded, "These are illegal. You are illegal." Still not really sure how to interpret that comment. And then he refused to say if Black Lives mattered to him or if he supported the movement. So, that being said, this was definitely a shock and not something we anticipated. Of course, we know that there's a lot of conservative folks here. We didn't really expect that the local levers of power would also most certainly actively be against what we were trying to do, just from a poster alone. And so, because that video, we didn't send it in, but the person who took the video sent it into Syracuse. That's how we garnered a lot of the media attention. And this definitely raised questions for me on how I interpret and digest media and digital activism of whose narrative is being elevated, what's being excluded, who are the voices who aren't being excluded, and what power structures does this identify and re-identify within what's being pushed through the media. And so it's definitely a double-edged sword. Digital media can have misinformation and disinformation. In my group, most definitely did our best to center what we wanted for the educational resources and away from the drama of it all, but also to make a point of what happened here is a symptom of the problem. Um, so I think that media has a power to uplift truth, but also can it is a double-edged sword, yes. And additionally to that, after the march, there were people who created a fake then Twitter account under our names and put up some very um, damaging things pretending to be us. And so it was definitely a lot of different barriers and challenges from the local level of what we saw.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Um, do you find yourself thinking back to those moments in that leadership? I know sometimes these things are just kind of thrusted onto us, and it's like, oh my goodness, you're called by kind of this like higher purpose, and you have to put yourself in a position of leadership, and those like experiences, I think really shape
Mhm.
us. Do you find yourself in the work that you do today? I don't mean to get too far ahead of ourselves in the conversation, but do you find yourself in the work that you do today referencing that experience often?
Absolutely. And I think that how I view my experience is very applicable to the environment and ecosystem of Skaneateles. And my experience as an organizer, holding the identity that I do, is very, very, very different than other experiences of other organizers and other Black women as well. For me, even though I had the mission to provide educational resources and programming and discussions, I'm also one to listen as much as I can and to learn from other people who care about the same
Mm.
issues as I do.
I want to shift the conversation here a little bit. I feel like we're starting to get a picture of, your background and some of the inspirations that have really shaped your approach to organizing, a better understanding this, experience that you had where you really led in the moment, right? When you were called to lead. I want to talk about the fascinating intersection of your work because you are working on this intersection of technology and social impact. Was there a particular aha moment that drew you into tech and tech policy?
Definitely. My junior year of Brown, I took a seminar called Cultures of Surveillance, and that opened my eyes to how it was like a theory-based class, but how all of which have been systemic injustices are many of them being replicated through surveillance technologies. And so that was definitely my aha moment of bridging together on how, looking at emerging technologies and how they affect human rights and how all the things that I care about are now being replicated and represented in the space of technology, and that led me to take more classes that had to do with information technology or data ethics. I took a coding course, and that was definitely what was a springboard into my current work.
Let's talk about mentorship because I think we acknowledge that growing up, like it takes a village, right, to kind of shape us. I think that continues to be true as we go through life and kind of dive into the areas of work that we are passionate about. Um, who have been some of your mentors and how have they inspired you to pursue tech policy further?
Yeah, so when I first started looking into what even is tech policy, what is AI policy, I thought that I needed to have a technical degree and even to understand the intricacies of technology and how they are affecting social impact and human rights. Um, and through just asking people to talk about their experiences, whether it was in technology, or in social impact, or in the intersection of the two, really taught me that you don't need to have deep technical expertise to understand the problem, and that any subject area, whether it's criminal justice, housing, environmental justice, all will touch upon tech equity at some point, and already is. And so I was fortunate to take a class by the former global head of human rights at YouTube, Malika Sedesar, at Brown, and her insights on how she influenced product development and ethical technology design really gave me a new perspective. And she's become a very close mentor of mine, and really thankful for her continued mentorship. I will say, for anyone who's listening who is hoping to get into this field, uh, I most certainly am always happy to talk about my experiences, but um, if you can, just schedule those conversations with people and just learn. And through these conversations, you will start really narrowing in what sparks your passion within this area, as well as any other people you would want to talk to, or resources. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about that because I hear that a lot, right? Around mentorship. Folks are always kind of encouraging others to find mentors or mentor others. I think that's really important, especially as our generation is getting older and we have that
Mhm.
capacity and that lived experience to support younger folks who are also looking to get engaged, who maybe are not that much younger than us, but that we can support in some
Mhm.
way. Um, and I what I rarely don't or what I don't hear usually is kind of the definition of like what is mentorship or like are there specific things that have really
Mhm.
helped you individually? Is it like a professional support that's really stood out to you around, work that you want to take on and better understanding someone else's work experience? Or is it the support of calling someone, which this has, I've done this, calling someone and saying, hey, like, I was asked to do this, or someone sent me this message and I have no idea how to respond. Like, how would you respond? Or like, have you navigated this project before
Right,
or
right.
this task? What is for you, like, what would you define as like the most supportive, yeah, the best support you've gotten from mentorship, and or kind of like the biggest takeaway from a good mentorship
Yeah,
relationship?
I think also just to know that my ability to access the support and resources and mentorship at Brown is a very unique experience in which I deeply, deeply appreciate that. But, those resources aren't available to everyone. And I think that's important to also note that within this niche but emerging field, it's hard to find the support and resources. Um, I will say a public mentorship program that was very impactful for me was the All Tech is Human community. And it's completely free if you have access to a computer, for to join their Slack community, in which there's all these different channels from job postings to advice, to just people who want to share their work. It's a very collaborative community, and they also have a mentorship program, which I participated in last cycle, so last year. And that was very helpful in narrowing down where I wanted my next step to be post grad. And yeah, I highly recommend anyone check them out. All Tech is Human.
Okay, well, we're definitely gonna link that in the bio, or more information on that in the bio. I think that's awesome. That's an awesome takeaway. Uh, let's talk about internships because you have done some incredible work even through your internships. And I have a feeling that that has also shaped like your incredible leadership today and the work that you continue to do in tech. So let's talk about that. At the Council on Foreign Relations, you were researching how data brokers use geolocation to track healthcare access. Does it ever feel like something out of Black Mirror? Like what can you take us through that a little bit? Like let's clarify what that means for folks that may not know first.
Yeah, so just to define some of the words, geofencing, or my research looked at data brokers' usage of geofencing, which is a method that companies can use to set up preset boundaries that, once a device goes within that boundary, data is sent to the data broker, and it can allow them to make dangerous assumptions. And within what I was looking at about women based on their locations within that geofence, which could be around a reproductive healthcare clinic. And so what that leads to is invasive ads or digital harassment. And so my research looked at different case studies, of how particular states, so New York and Connecticut, have regulated the use of geofencing around reproductive healthcare clinics. And so it and arguing that we need a federal privacy law that specifically includes, geofencing and reproductive health care measures. And so, yes, it most certainly does feel like a Black Mirror episode when you look into this, because with the overturn of Roe v. Wade, um, abortion vigilante laws, such as the, Texas Heartbeat Act, and rising maternal mortality rates, this is only going to get worse. Not data, sorry, the data broker, industry is worth $280 billion and is, projected to rapidly increase over the next decade. And so we do need legislation that looks at this, because healthcare and data privacy are now completely intertwined, and you can't advocate for healthcare privacy, for reproductive healthcare rights, without looking at how data privacy is, influencing this and is perpetuating, the violations from this.
Integrated with, you know, the physical world and the digital world and the way that we, you know, leverage the digital world to engage on so many fronts. A lot of the activism and a lot of the organizing work that we've seen historically has a digital component. I mean, I would feel very comfortable saying all of it does, right? And so there are all of these questions that come up, right, on how do we continue to navigate, set boundaries, make sure that rights and liberties and privacies are upheld, at that forefront of activism and activism meets tech, which is your intersection. So that's incredible because you're uniquely positioned to then, you know, lead on that, and obviously you have been for a while. Um, how have your experiences in activism and media influenced your approach to organizing on these tech issues?
Hmm. I will say in 2022, I, interned with a National Geographic education team, and specifically worked with National Geographic explorer Ashley Lamb Sinclair, on her project 2892 Miles to Go. And so what this project did was that it's still ongoing. So it utilizes media, content creation, and storytelling to work with community partners and transform, narratives that into nuanced digital storytelling resources. And so I really took a lot from this project because in a world where we feel that we're constantly bombarded by information and that the information ecosystem is just never ending and there's constant content that feels like an information overload, the project took data and humanized it through community engagement. And so I really do believe that it it's the same for sensitive tech issues and important to find ways to avoid normalizing these challenges, especially as a generation who's grown up with this digital technology, and just really humanize the stories and the data when it's appropriate. I think that that is key to really avoid this precarious territory of thinking that surveillance and the data privacy violations are something that we should just grapple with and that are normal.
Yeah. Yeah. We need to continue to educate folks on the expectations that we should have around tech and our rights in this new digital world. Yeah, I love that. I think young people are so specifically positioned as well to lead on this front because we are already digital citizens and really acting on that front to a degree higher than any other generation, right? I mean, we could get into those statistics. I'm pretty sure we have other content out there that'll talk about that. So I won't dive too much into that. You also interned at the White House, and I'm going to recognize that because I actually am good friends with the current associate director of the White House internship program, one of my best friends for years, and I am aware of how competitive it is to get an internship at the White House. It's not easy. And so one, like kudos to you because I mean it's obvious to see why you got an internship at the White House. But it's still an incredible accomplishment. How did working there change your perception on politics, federal policy, the White House? Like what was that
Yeah,
like?
absolutely. I love this question. You know what? I had no idea that the ma a large amount of 20 somethings are working within the White House. And so when I first got
Yeah.
there, I kind of anticipated that the only 20 somethings might be interns. And as I started getting to know different offices and people who held leadership roles and were in these rooms for when decisions were made that had great impacts on federal policy, I didn't realize how many young people there were. And so that most definitely influenced my perception of federal making or federal policy making, was the demographic representation. I'd say a pinch me moment was when I was able to work at the Juneteenth celebration at the White House, and I got to see Jennifer Hudson perform, and uh, that if it's right,
Amazing.
and that in of itself, there was just a lot of emotion in the crowd, and the energy alone was extremely surreal.
Yeah. Was there anything like because the Office of Public Engagement is inside the White House proper?
Yes.
Is that right?
No, sorry, it's in Eisenhower. It's
Yeah.
in
Okay.
Eisenhower.
No,
Yes.
it's in the Eisenhower. So for folks that don't know, just to clarify, there's the White House is not that huge, right? Like I mean, yes, it's large, but office space in there is
Right.
is not incredibly abundant, and so there's kind of attached to the White House. There's the executive office building, the Eisenhower
Mhm.
executive office building, and so a lot of folks that are working at the White House sometimes work in that kind of larger building, and actually the vice president's office is in that
Yes.
building, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Okay. Um, that's right. Both are incredible. Yeah, I mean, that's such a cool experience. What was your like? What was your favorite part about that? Like, was it just like showing up to work every day and going through that security and like looking up at the big tall building? Like, what was your favorite part on a
Yeah, I
personal
think
level?
on a personal level, there were a few people in Office of Public Engagement who I got to work with, who were liaisons and had their own set portfolio. So I was able to work on labor, a little bit with African American portfolio,
Mm,
LGBTQ plus portfolio, and sports as well and events. And so all the interns in OPE, we were able to cycle and rotate through different portfolios. So because of that, I was able to work with a lot of different people. And it was clear those who led those portfolios really cared about their work and how they can do their work to the best of their ability. And I think that alone was what was most impactful was not even the work itself, but seeing how they approached their work and the level of care that they applied to it. Just with a few people
yeah.
off the top of my head who I can think of who I work directly with in the office.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such a good thing to point out for folks. I know there's a lot of mysticism around how our federal government operates and how um, a lot of this work is actually carried out. And you mentioned, right, there's a lot of younger folks working in these spaces. There's a lot of 20 somethings working in the White House who are not interns, who are there really championing a lot of this work. And they're doing it because they care. I mean, these are jobs that require a lot of time, right? I mean, and I have quite a few friends that have worked for the White House, and they are some of the hardest working people I've ever met, and are doing it because they care about the work that they're doing, the topic that they're focused in on. And I think that's so important to recognize. One, because we need to recognize that hard work that's happening day in and day out by those individuals that are there, because they believe in the work that they're doing, but also because it's important to humanize like what is going on in those spaces. It's really important, and it's yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
people should know. People should know
yeah,
what's going
exactly. And I
on.
think also to note that it's what we said about if you love your community, you want to see it be do better as well. And I think that um a lot of people I met and discussions I continue to have, it's important to listen and to know how like what we can be doing better from a multitude of different angles as a country as the for the administration. And um I think that those conversations I was able to have within the White House and during my time there was really eye-opening and let me see other non-surface levels of care and how people approach their work as well.
Yeah. What what specific time period were you here in at OPE?
Just the summer, so
Just the summer.
summer of 2023.
2023. Okay. Nice weather, I hope. That's kind of
Oh
difficult.
yeah, DC. It
Yeah.
was humid.
Yeah, it was probably humid and raining a lot and sunny at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah.
Um, I want to talk about your leadership as a college student at Brown University. So you were leading Brown University Democrats and organizing student canvassing trips for figures like Senator Warnock, Congressman Magaziner. That's not a small task to organize these trips. For awareness for folks that may not know, can you tell us what is canvassing and what's something about student-led canvassing that might surprise people?
Definitely. So political canvassing is the process of where you can directly engage with voters, whether that's door-to-door knocking or making phone calls or phone banking, and essentially just sharing information about a candidate and really trying to break down any misinformation barriers or listening to the voters' concerns. I think that's something that people don't always often understand about canvassing is it's important to listen as much as you talk, to really understand where the voter feels on specific issues and meet them where they are. And essentially, the whole point of canvassing is to encourage voter turnout and also empowering communities and voters that they do have a voice. And it's, if, letting them know the resources on different ways they can get to the polls or how to protect their voter rights. And so a lot of different things go into canvassing. Through Brown Dems, we had an internship match program that for Congressman Magazine or a specific campaign paired about 30 students to work on his campaign. And he, before the election, was down in every single poll and then ended up winning by 4 points. And so when he spoke to us, he visited us for an event in the spring. He said that his success wouldn't have been possible without Brown Dems. And I just want to highlight and just give credibility, all the credit to the student interns. A couple students actually took the semester off to work on his campaign full time. And just kind of banding together on um through again like education and just trying to talk to voters. And of course, Brown Dems weren't the only ones who were canvassing, but I think it's important if you can help any community you're situated in to do so. And I think students particularly have the ability to listen and to actively learn as well through voters and political canvassing.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a memorable moment there. Like the fact that he recognized your hard work um, as a part of that victory. Do you know? Sorry to put you on the spot. Do you know like how many votes he won by?
Oh man,
That's a very
I'm
specific question, so it's
but I
okay.
do know it
We will
was
figure it out and we'll
he
put it on the screen, I
he,
guess.
he won by 50 points something of the
Wow.
vote.
I mean, that's the power of like of this organizing work right there, right? I mean, it really does come that close sometimes, and I think that shows like how important this canvassing work is. Thank you for sharing that. Particularly excited about this next question. So, you've had the opportunity to co-present awards to Senator Bernie Sanders, California Representative Katie Porter, and you've hosted Representative Ayanna Pressley on campus. That's an incredible roster of community that you're building for yourself. What was it like meeting them?
So all of them are just incredibly kind, insightful, and brilliant people. Uh, I especially took pride in hosting. I should mention also hosting Representative Maxwell Frost and Council Member Chi Osei about their unique pathways as Gen Zers and to public service and the challenges they face. And so that I'm really glad that we were able to bring specifically both of them to campus or virtually to campus as well to really highlight their journeys. My favorite event was definitely meeting Congresswoman Presley.
Mm-hmm.
She is such a genuine and kind person with an incredible story. Uh, Something that stuck with me was when she um, emphasized that policy is a love language and that
Mm,
policymakers should always center those who are closest to the impact and the pain in their decision-making process. And so, though this may feel intuitive, her words really stuck with me and resonated with me. And I think I'm gonna hold that close to my heart and take it with me in whatever line of work looks like in the future.
mm. I think that should be like written on all of the streets in Washington D.C. as a reminder to
I
people.
agree.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so good. I wish we were operating in developing policy from that
Mhm.
like that heart like all the time, right?
Right, right.
I have to say I like I love all of them, and that's so exciting. Like that you like have had the chance to engage with all of them. I worked, shameless plug. I worked on the 2020 Bernie campaign, and so was working at the headquarters here in Washington D.C. and had the privilege of working closely with that leadership team and the senator. Yeah, a great group of folks, really. I mean,
Yes, yeah.
not to make this, I guess, too partisan, but um, I I want to talk about tech policy. I know we have been kind of like to an extent weaving it through the conversation, um, but let's kind of dive into your work today. So yeah, you're a part of the Kapor Foundation. Seems like a significant part of your journey so far to move from all of this organizing and growth and leadership opportunities, internship work that you've really carved out for yourself. Tell us what it's like working at Kapor.
It's been great so far. This fall, we were able to, well, I was able to support our involvement with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Conference. We co-hosted a roundtable with the Federation of American Scientists at the White House about tech equity and AI. And I'm currently researching what AI accountability looks like within data center infrastructure. And it's been a really rewarding experience. I'm surprised with how much untapped potential exists in leveraging tech policy to close equity gaps, which is the Kapor Foundation's mission. And it's not just about regulating tech, but also using policy to ensure that technology works for underserved communities rather than exacerbating inequalities, which has been definitely a theme of our conversation today.
Right. Yeah. That's that's very cool. I know we've that's actually how we met was through the Kapor Foundation, and so it's been really exciting to get to learn about like the incredible portfolio of work that you all have. Um, and you we kind of talked about it a little bit, or you just mentioned it here in your answer, but you all really are at the forefront of tech and equity work, and that's so important in today's world that we have champions like Caper there, right? Like, and the fact that they're elevating you it says a lot about the kind of leadership, the kind of voices that they care to include in conversations, and that is really really commendable given all of your experience and background. Is there anything that has surprised you like in the tech policy space, or that like has that kind of like stood out to you that you've learned while being at Caper?
Yeah, definitely. Um, I think the people who I work with at Kapor are just such inspiring and motivating individuals who've taught me how to balance optimism with realism and the urgency of addressing these harms, such as AI bias or um, search engine inequalities. It's something that sometimes feels like you're staring up at a great mountain, but Kapor has taught me that it progressing to change requires both big vision, but also the willingness to dive into these uncomfortable realities and take things step by step.
Yeah, that's that's very unique for a place of work, especially being so young, right? I mean, which we are. I mean, well, you're younger than I am, but um, it is really unique to have such a wonderful place to grow and develop, continue to develop your leadership uh, as a kind of, it sounds interesting to say this, but as a start to your kind of professional growth. I mean, you've been doing a lot of this work for much longer than the time that you've been out of college, but um, it is very exciting and very unique to have that community, that work environment. Reflecting on your path, from grassroots activism to engaging in wide-reaching policy work. What's one aspect of fighting for change that resonates differently for you now?
hmm Yeah, I think it's important to still critically examine the policies that may seem neutral on the surface. And that's something I am and will continue to learn as new policies arise, even if they seem neutral, not good, not bad, still examine them and see it. So this may be more critical of the quote unquote default approach and more focus on equity as that core leading principle.
Mm. Which is so important. We were talking about like shifting that frame of mind, right? Um,
Definitely.
and the value that comes with having that shifted frame of mind and approaching our work from that place of, I guess, it being that love language. I'm going to be obsessed with that quote for a little while.
Isn't it great?
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
good. Um, oh, so we're getting kind of to the end here, and we have what has become a signature question to close this out. And so I'm excited um, to get your thoughts here. Uh, what is your favorite tech tool and why?
Okay, I'm gonna take more of a nerdy approach to this
Okay.
question. Um, but I have recently been really curious about spatial visualization software. So,
Hmm.
such as ArcGIS, Data Wrapper, have been really interesting on how I look at policies when I can visualize them, how I look at inequalities when I can see it. I'm a very visual learner. And so that is definitely my favorite tech tool group. And I'm still learning how to use these softwares and technologies. And I've done past research looking at broadband inequity with ArcGIS in
Mm.
the Black Belt of the American Southeast. And my ability to understand that topic in a more nuanced way just by seeing it resonated with me. And that's how I want to continue to replicate my work. So hopefully I make more impact as I go through my career using these types of tech tools.
When you say visualize it, what does that mean exactly? For folks that may not be familiar.
Yeah, so could be maps, it could be graphs, but they're color coded. So areas that are more prevalent with X, Y, or Z might be a darker color. And that kind of is a way you can use for storytelling and going back to National Geographic's and Ashley Lamb Sinclair's 2892 project. There's a lot of ArcGIS that's used in story maps and really helps uplift data. And I think on the point of humanizing data, it does a good job for our ability to digest statistics.
That's really interesting. I don't know if we can link that here, but I'd be interested to like give folks the opportunity to go and explore some of those tools a little
Yeah,
bit more.
definitely. Yeah.
Um,
And Data Wrapper
I
is free as well. You don't need a license
okay,
or anything to use it.
very cool. I want to open it up, Cecilia. I don't know if there's anything else that we haven't covered in the conversation so far that you want us to make sure that we highlight, but it's been incredible talking to you. Happy to open the floor, or if you have any questions for me, I know that's kind of that's unexpected, but if you have any questions, happy to open up the floor before we close out with our closing message.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you. This has been wonderful. Okay, my question for you is what's your favorite tech tool?
Oh no. I don't know if I'm ready. Jeez. You know, hmm. I'm really stumped on that. I use like AI assistants a lot.
Yeah.
In like my day to day. Like the other day, I was trying to figure out like how to go about. This is very me, but how to like go about like shopping for like a specific set of items of clothing, and I was like stumped on like matching, and so I was like on like ChatGPT or something, and I was just like inserting like, how do I match this color sweater with like this shoe, and like,
Okay.
so I use it on a daily basis, and so that probably adds the most value to my life, is just being able to have that. Um, and I'm sure there are more that I could like name, but I mean that's, I think, the one that just comes to mind the most. Um, yeah, that's a good question. I should think more about that question.
Sorry to put you
Um,
on the spot.
no, this is good. This is good. We need these thoughts. Yeah, that's good. Actually, there are a lot of design tools. I have a love-hate relationship with design.
Mm,
Um, and I'm very good at, I think, kind of like, I have an eye for design, but I'm very bad at actually designing things myself. Which I think you can tell here by like the vision boards that I create, that I put up on my wall. They're not very like pretty. So like I have a vision, but tools that like design tools are great. I'm a big fan of like some of Canva's new tools, Photoshop, like some of their AI tools are
yeah.
really cool. I love using those. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
kind of there. Yeah.
Canva is amazing. I in other roles where I focus on communications or content creation, I use Canva a lot. And I love that it's just so accessible even without the pro version.
Hmm.
And anyone can use Canva, which I love. So um design tools and making them even more applicable to, or not applicable, but sorry, I just lost my train of thought. But
Oh no, you're
design
good.
tools that are um, becoming even more user-friendly and
Yeah.
accessible. I think accessibility is really the big word for designing apps. I'm excited
Yeah.
to see what that looks like in the next few years, decade.
That's right. I mean, it's we're simultaneously adopting so many of these tools so naturally, especially our generation, but they're still, I mean, widening certain like gaps
Yeah,
in preparedness to like to move forward in some of these professions where these tools are being adopted, and there's an expectation now that like you can navigate them,
right,
and they're moving so quickly. I mean,
right.
I'm a particular fan of Canva's like tone
Oh
like
yeah, you
tool,
used to use it.
like in their branding.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's new or not, or maybe I just didn't know about it.
Yeah.
But I find that it's great for captions. I struggle, I think, with creating that like fun energy. I try to be a fun, energetic person. I think sometimes I'm just like a little bit too like in the like in the deep DC like policy.
Locked
Um,
in.
yeah, and so it's like hard sometimes
Yeah.
to write something fun, and so I like use that tool that like you can set your own brand tone and you describe it, and it just generates for you. And it actually does a really great job, better than most other tools that I've used for that
Right.
purpose. Um, yeah, a big fan. I'm gonna read out our closing line here, and then the team will help out with some of the editing here, but just so that we have kind of that like wrap up message.
Totally.
I want to say thank you for sharing your story with us today, Cecilia. It's been amazing to have this conversation with you. For our listeners who want to follow along with your journey, where can they find you and your work?
Good question. I'm thinking about potentially building a website, but I have not gotten to it yet. So in the meantime, feel free to contact me via LinkedIn for Cecilia Marrinan. So until then, until I have more of a public facing contact, that would be the best way.
Awesome. Well, we will make sure to link that information so that folks can find you. And please, folks, I mean, stay tuned. I'm so excited to see what else you continue to work
Thank
on,
you.
and what's next for Cecilia.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This was an incredible conversation. Until next time.